a little bit of, summary of what are all the options to integrate SQL database in our end-to-end solutions via data flows with notebooks, with pipelines. We are going to be talking about semantic models, the Power BI integrations, so much that's going on right now in the Fabric space. As I mentioned before, my name is Gaston Cruz. I am from Uruguay, South America, and been in the MVP Summit this week, joining a lot of great sessions. Actually, I am in the Microsoft headquarters today, so let's kick it off and let's move on. Gonzalo, quick intro on your end.
Yeah, I'm Gonzalo Vicio. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Right now, I am not on the MVP Summit, but I am in the South Cone in Argentina. I will switch to this beautiful photo. I will be with my friend Gaston next week on the FabCon in Las Vegas. We hope that you can join there. It will be amazing. There will be a lot of things, funny stuff, I would say. We will be there supporting you, answering your questions. We will be there. Well, Gaston has amazing sessions scheduled there as well. So we hope that you can join that amazing event. And let's start. All yours.
Awesome, awesome. So let's start kicking off this one with some things that, as I mentioned before, what are the options that we have in terms of, integrating SQL database in Microsoft Fabric? So one of the starting point here is if you are going to be getting data and connecting data from multiple sources, the very first option that you have is via data pipeline. So as you might know in this user group, Fabric is a unified data solution. So you have multiple workloads, you have multiple ways to do things. So one of the ways is jumping right away to the data factory workload in Fabric. Remember that one of the main features from Microsoft is if you are a Power BI user, you are a potential Fabric user. What that really means that if you have a Power BI tenant and you have access to that Power BI tenant and you are an admin on that tenant, you can just enable Fabric, and that enablement for Fabric could be only for some security groups that they are testing the Fabric functionalities, and you're gonna start, doing workloads and enabling different options and how to get data, how to land data. Today, you have a whole operational database that is a SQL database that you can spin up in the Fabric tenant. And for most all of you that wants to be hands-on, this is something that you can enable for free. You can go and look at the developer subscriptions options, and you can enable you free subscription on the Microsoft Developer Program. You can just look in any browser, hey, I will have an E5 subscription developer program, and you can spin up right away your own Power BI tenant. Once you have that tenant, you can enable a trial version of Fabric, and you can start doing hands-on experience on Fabric right away. So this slide is explaining, hey, if I go to the data factory experience, one of the very first options is starting a data pipeline. From the data pipeline, you have multiple connections with multiple data sources, on-premises, Microsoft, non-Microsoft, and you can integrate right away a data pipeline. And even in top of that, you can start calling different artifacts from the data pipeline. So Gonzalo later on this session is going to be talking a lot about notebooks, and you can actually create your notebook, transforming data, cleansing data, but you can call those notebooks from the data pipeline experience. So what I'm saying here is you can extract the data and land the data leveraging data pipelines and taking this data pipeline item as an orchestrator for your end-to-end solution. So you can enable data pipeline, start calling data flows or notebooks, and then landing the data into a data warehouse or a SQL database or a data warehouse. So multiple options in terms of landing the data. Remember, once you land the data itself is going to be in a public format that's a Delta Parquet format. And it's really important, that topic, because once you land the data in Fabric, it's going to become part of the One Lake framework. And why is really important on this topic? Because once you land the data into Fabric, you can access that data, of course, if you have access to that data, but you can leverage, for example, Databricks to extract or access that data that you just land in one lake. Let's move on, Gonzalo, on this one. And as I mentioned before, multiple connectors available out of the box. You don't need to build connectors to access your data. Multiple connectors in terms of on-premises data and cloud data. This is exactly what a pipeline looks like. In this case, you can delete data, you can copy data, you have multiple copy assistant data, so you don't need to really go and going into a pro code environment. That's more Gonzalo mindset in the notebooks. He's going to be talking about how you pro code and enter in Python scripting to leverage transformation. But in this case, pipeline, you can see that you just drop in different options in terms of the canvas, like a copy command, like calling a notebook, like delete data, like, you are going to be able just to drop different activities in the main canvas, and each of the activities can be relate each other. So that is kind of the magic behind the scenes in the pipeline. It's a low code solution right away, but can be integrated with multiple items. In this case, this slide is talking about one of the options to land the data in Microsoft Fabric, data flows. So you can leverage data flows, Shen2. For those really familiar with the Power BI environment, they're going to be loving this because Power Query is here. So you can create a new item. You can create a data flow Shen 2. With data flow Shen 2 is Power Query. So you are getting data, connecting to multiple sources. After you create the connections with multiple sources, it's totally code free. So you don't need to understand any code at all. You connect with the data, even if Oracle, SharePoint, Excel, CSV, JSON files, out of the box, you connect to that data, you start manipulating the data, transforming, cleansing the data. And remember, I talked before about data pipeline. If you are creating a data pipeline for the orchestration and you are using a copy assistant command, and then you want to transform the data, you can call the data flow in terms of transformation from the orchestration in your data pipeline. That means that they are not really quite disconnected as an item. What I'm saying here is you can start from scratch, creating your pipeline, connecting to your data source, let's say a SQL on-premises data source. You connect to the data, then you need to transform the data, let's say, and clean the data. So you create a data flow to that cleansing of the data, and you go back to the pipeline and connect with the data flow. So you continue all the orchestrations from this one. Let's move to the next one. And one of the things that I would love to recall here is, and the main difference for Power BI consultants, the main difference is that the data flows Shen 2 allow you to land the data in Microsoft Fabric. That means that once you get the data, you transform the data, then you can say, hey, I would love to land the data in a Fabric SQL database, or in a lakehouse, or warehouse, or custody database. So you're going to be able to land the data in any of those items that you have in the different workloads within Fabric. And main question from different user groups and different meetups that I was presenting on this one, they asked me, hey, Gaston, but how you land the data, how you define if you need a lakehouse, or you need a data warehouse, or you are switching to SQL DB. I don't like the answer of it depends, but in this case, yeah, it depends, because based on your use case, your scenario, your context is where you define if you need a lake house, if you're going to be talking with structured plus unstructured data, or you prefer the operational side of things because you're landing operational transactions, and then you're going to be picking up a SQL databases. And remember that the new skill in the game here is that actually you can enable SQL databases within Fabric itself. So let's move on the next one, and we are going to be looking at everybody is talking about Copilot everywhere. So Copilot is also part of the fabric. And uh, let's try to be real here. That is, Copilot is a different experience based on the workloads that we are talking about. For example, the Copilot here in this screen is showing how to leverage Copilot in the pipeline or the orchestration process. Like, I go with Copilot and say, hey, I would love to add a new activity in my pipeline. Hey, I would love to remove this column in this pipeline or in this feature. And the experience is going to be kind of the same, but with the different questions if I am talking about a data flow, because in a data flow, it's more about transformation. So you can ask Copilot, hey, let's take the first row on my table and transform that row as a title of each column. Or I need to remove the date column, or I need to remove the product ID. Or even better, I can go and say, hey, let's take the first three items in this column table and remove them and create as a new column for this data source. So you can do a lot of things for transformations, even in the Copilot experience, in pipeline or in data flows as well. This is a quick demo of how to load data in data flows. Let's check it out, and I'm going to be talking a little bit on what's going on here. So in this demo, we are creating a new item from scratch. We are just creating a new data flows, and you can see that in this screen, you can click on a database, a SQL database, and from the SQL database, I can go and say, hey, I want to land data here, so I'm going to create a new data flows within the SQL database artifact. So I am spinning up a new data flows directly from the SQL database. Once I spin up a new data flow in my SQL database experience, I'm going to be, first of all, doing kind of a name, giving a name to my data flow. So I'm creating a new data flow and I am naming that data flow directly from scratch. In my case, I'm importing speaker profiles. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to get data from data flows. In my get data is going to be a CSV file that I already have. So I'm going to be uploading. As you can see, I can upload from my machine. That is one of the options. I can browse and say, hey, I have my CSV file here in my machine, connect to that speaker profile CSV file. I'm uploading that CSV file from my machine. And then you can see that it's setting up automatically the connection for me. Then once I hit that CSV file, I am connecting to that data source right away. And remember that we start the process from the SQL database. So once we have all the data coming here together and I have a whole preview of the data, I create that integrations with the CSV file. And from that CSV file, you can see that it's getting all the columns together. And then the first row is just all the columns name. So in the transformation here, I am clicking on the use first row as headers. Check that everything is UX UI. I don't use any line of code to make this happen. What you are doing here is just using the UX UI design. You are removing columns or add columns, everything from the UI UX. You don't need to be a guru in Power Query to make this happen. You can just go and use all the activities, all the transformation, unpivot columns, and so on. And you can replace values, you can split columns, you can do a bunch of different transformations without any single line of code. And then you can land the data right away. In this case, we are landing the data in a Fabric SQL database. So you are connecting where it is really simple as a SaaS service. You don't need to move from one workload to the other. You are just creating the connection with a SQL database. You are creating just a new table in that SQL database. In my case, I'm creating just the connection to a SQL database. And from that SQL database, I'm saying, hey, I would love to have a new table in that SQL database based on all the transformation that I have in my data flow. And from that data flow, I'm connecting just right away, doing all these transformations and saying, hey, in this sessions database, I would love to have a new table that is going to be speaker profiles. And that is exactly what I'm doing here. And I am just saving the settings and doing the destination. So once I'm doing this, I'm landing right away the data. After I transform the data from data flows, I'm landing that data right away into my SQL database within Fabric. So everything is integrated in one of the unified solutions within Fabric. You can see the spinning up there. You can see that a new item in my workspace is created, and that is the importing the speaker profile, is refreshing all the data. That means that is getting the connection to the data source CSV file, is doing the transformation. After doing the transformation, is landing the data right away to my sessions database as a SQL database in the Fabric item. No Azure services at all. It's all Fabric. It's all in one single bucket. Then you can see here the full integration with Power BI semantic model. So you can right away after I land the data in my SQL database, I can go right away after landing the data in SQL database, I can go and say, hey, I would love to start playing around with Power BI. But remember, a lot of work for Power BI users is not reporting, is taking care of the semantic models. So best advice from my end here, take your time and work in your semantic model, work in relationships, work in the primary keys. Take your time to really clean the data, work in your synonyms, because if you want to leverage Power BI Copilot, it's not magic. It's going to be learning from your semantic model. So you need to go and understand what's going on in your semantic model. What is the relationships between your tables? And in this case, then after you create the semantic model, you're going to be creating the Power BI report right away in top of that. So one of the things that I would love to recall is for those working with Power BI, remember that in this case, because you are in the Fabric family, instead of going and import or doing data query against your data source, you can hit a new experience in Fabric that is connecting Power BI with your backend via direct lake connection. And that is really awesome because once you start landing data in the SQL database, in our case, you can have a really place fast performance connecting Power BI with your backend via direct lake connection. So this is not a one-time load. I can right away and say, hey, anytime Gonzalo keep pushing data via notebooks into my SQL database, or someone else is pushing more data via incremental refresh in data flows, I don't need even to refresh data in my Power BI. It's going to be connecting with my semantic models. And once a new role is happening in the SQL database behind the scenes, the Power BI is going to be just refreshing automatically everything that happens in the backend. So you don't need to take care about refresh or partitions or incremental refresh. You just keep landing more data into your SQL database or your lakehouse or your data warehouse that your semantic models is going to be refreshed right away without doing anything at all.
Couple of questions there.
Yeah, of course.
So the first one is one that I assume that you responded before because relates to is this one-time load only, or can we set up scheduled data loads using Dataflow? How about incremental data loads? Is that done using data pipeline as opposed to Dataflows?
Yeah, you can do all the things in different ways. You can load the data just one time. You can set up incremental loads of the data via data flows or via pipelines. You can trigger the refresh or your pipeline orchestrations, and you don't need any kind of refresh to do that. The next thing that I would love to leverage here is something that I mentioned before. The one lake is all around Delta Packet format. So in every single item, SQL database, lakehouse, data warehouse, you are going to see all the Delta Packet formats. So Isay, I hope that I mentioned in the right way your name. Can we see the packet file for the SQL database? Yes. you have access to the delta parquet in every single item in Fabric. For the question from Prasant, is it support fully SAP? What we need to extract the data from SAP and load into Azure. There's an out-of-the-box connector to SAP and ACP HANA. You need to check the versions just to be careful in terms of that your version of SAP match of the connectors that you already have and the licensing model, of course. One of the great questions here is about the building of reports. So let's go next, Gonzalo, and we can check on the report creation, and we can run this demo, and you can check how easy it is to integrate Power BI with your items here in the Fabric workflow. So here you can see that even in the way of creating new items, you can go to the database right away. And from the database itself, you can go and say, hey, I would love from this database, I am checking all the tables that I already have. I even have some views created on my workload. And from the views and from my tables, I can just hit and create a new semantic model from there. You can create a new report from there, and it's pretty easy to start working because everything is in one single place. As you can see, I am not in the need of creating anything else. I just create a whole semantic model. I made all the connections in my semantic models. I can connect with the views in my SQL database. I can connect with tables in my SQL database. Check that the blue lines, dotted lines there, is because you are doing a direct lake connection into the SQL database. That means that blue color allow you to go and say, hey, I need a refresh? No, because I'm doing direct lake connection. So right away, what we can see here is that once anybody on my team, in the data engineer team, keep landing data in SQL database, they're going to see right away everything that refresh in your semantic model without any hassle. From here, you can automatically update the semantic model, and from there, you can just hit new report, and you don't need to open a new window, a new tab, or anything else. You can just hit the new report, and you're going to see the whole Power BI web experience happening right away. And from there, you can just start creating your reports from scratch. This is pretty easy. It's Power BI World, so you can click the connections, see all the views, see all your tables, all the columns, and you can start just creating your report from scratch here. Even if you have access to Copilot, you can go and say, hey, Copilot, based on my semantic model, I would love to create this report to analyze the sales or the speakers or the sessions or the venues. Of course, you need to understand the business logic of your semantic model to ask the right questions and to prompt against your semantic model. But you need to understand what's going on in your semantic model. And in this case, you can access, as we can see, locations from the speaker profiles. So I'm going to be doing some analysis in top of my data of my speaker session. So I analyze how many sessions each speaker has for each location. As we can see here, you can filter saying, hey, I only would love to see the sessions that all the speakers has in South America. And you can check all the tables in terms of, hey, I would love to create a table to see, hey, what are the sessions that all the speakers did in the past in South America, and who was those speakers? In this case, Carlos Maria has some sessions in South America, and you can filter right away, and you can see a little bit of, the profile of those speakers. So remember that the semantic model was connecting to SQL database. So if any changes happen in the SQL database anytime, I don't need even to refresh at all. No, because those are the connections that we already have between the SQL database in Fabric, the semantic model, and now the Power BI report. So everything is well connected right away. The other question from Prasant in the chat, we can set up Delta incremental full load from SAP? Yes, any data source. Any data source can be on this track in terms of, connecting with the pipeline, connecting with data flows, and even connecting with notebooks. And I can say, hey, I would love to set up a full load and then daily basis, let's say, incremental loads of the data. So that's totally possible at this point. I'm going to switch back to Gonzalo, and I'm going to show you a little bit more the MVP Summit here in the Microsoft Redmond headquarters. The building is full at this point, so I appreciate everyone that's showing this call.
Thank you, sir. Amazing, amazing as usual. So regarding SAP, it depends a lot on the version that you have on the source, because it will be easy to say, hey, do you have, I don't know, SAP HANA? Yes, there will be a connector. But if you have, for example, an old version from on-premise, just be careful, just make sure that Fabric supports that, because depending if you're using Dataflows or if you're using pipelines, it depends the version that you have, if that will be supported. Otherwise, you can use, for example, yes, thank you, SAP S/4HANA. Yeah, so be careful with that. Just check, because sometimes I have different customers that have different SAP version, and sometimes I have to use Azure Data Factory in the middle just to read data from SAP, or just to, insert data into Fabric. Or, for example, other third-party solutions, there are a lot of partners that connect to SAP and just leave the data within Fabric, like Fivetran. Yeah, I can show you quick, because the thing is, you need to install, if you're going to use data pipelines, for example, you need to install the gateway on the source, let's say, on the SAP environment, just to connect to Fabric. But I can share afterwards some links with that, just to, connect to SAP. Regarding the question about I saw SQL database and the Parquet file. So here's the thing. I don't know if you discussed this before on the chapter before with Javi and John. So basically, the SQL database configuration behind bars, or the architecture, is the same Azure SQL database that you have today. But the thing is, behind bars, it's happening what is called mirroring. I don't know if you are familiar with that concept. So basically, the entire database is being replicated using mirroring to Fabric. And so if you want, basically you are going to use, for example, SQL endpoint to connect. I will show you in a demo. But basically behind bars, there is a normal or a regular Azure SQL database being replicated using mirroring. There is a link with the architecture and how the process works, in case that you are interested in, or I can share the link afterwards. But now let's talk about notebooks. Gaston spoke about pipelines, data flows, Power BI, and the whole experience. We have everything together. But let's say that you are a pro code person. Let's say that you don't want to be, every time that you use, for example, a vendor solution, and you want to move from one side to another, just move code and files, let's say, in this case, Parquet files, which is being used behind bars, and you want to use code because you want to use Python, and you don't want to use a GUI, for example. Well, you have the options, or the option to use notebooks. In notebooks, for example, you can create environments with your own libraries. You know that you can install libraries within Microsoft Fabric just to create the notebooks. But you can create your own environment just to control what are the libraries being used within the environment. You can create, for example, different graphs, as you can see on the screenshot. You can manage different languages. In fact, for example, today you can use notebooks with T-SQL code directly, and you can connect natively to SQL database behind bars, or the Fabric SQL database behind bars using T-SQL code, and that's it. If you want to use the regular notebooks, there are some things that you need to do. Today is not fully supported there because of the authentications, among other things. But the notebooks, in fact, you can use also, as Gaston mentioned before, you can use Copilot. But let me go, I will go directly into the demo. I love demos, sorry. So first of all, let me just move this. In the meantime, well, this one is fabric.microsoft.com. You can use, yes, OneLake File Explorer, yes, you can install that and you can check that if you want to see what are the files, etc., but it depends where they are. Fabric.microsoft.com. Here you have what is called workspaces, in where you will see all the objects that you already created. Well, Gaston also mentioned about the differences between Fabric and Power BI. Before, you can see that on this particular part, as you can see, it's the new Fabric view. Before, we have here data engineering, the analytics, etc., Power BI, and now you have only two experiences. The good thing, though, is that, sorry. The good thing is that I didn't receive any licensing question, which is great because the licensing questions are very, regular, normal. I saw a bunch of questions about that, so that is great. Thank you. So I have my workspace. Well, basically, if you want to create, for example, I don't know if you already did this, but just in case, you can filter by create here a SQL database. As you can see, it's very simple. Then you can put the name, and then you can insert data if you want, like AdventureWorks. We are DBAs, and we know what AdventureWorks means. The light version, whatever version, all of us use AdventureWorks because we love it. And so once you create the database, you will see, for example, this one. In my case, obviously, I install my AdventureWorks with some data. Honestly, as you can see here, you can just query this as a regular database. If you love, for example, like me, Management Studio, or also you use Visual Studio Code, you have here the connection strings to connect. If you click here, you will see the server name and the database name. And if you open Management Studio, as you can see here, you will see, well, basically what I did was to use the server name, and here I put the database name. As you can see, type test. I should use type procs. I know, but I use type's name and the server name. And you must use MFA authentication because SQL authentication today is not supported. And you will see a regular database. As you can see, this one above is an Azure SQL database. This one below is a Fabric database. It's exactly the same, so you will see the same. For Visual Studio, you will see the same information, but you will have to install what is called an extension here, which is the SQL Server one, which is this one, MS SQL, and then you will create the connection as I did before. Well, here you will see the connections. You click the plus and then you use the exact server name, the database name, the same authentication, and you will see this. I just executed a query, and as you can see here, the result. Gonzalo, use GitHub Copilot. Can I use it? Yes, absolutely. It's the same. It's inside Visual Studio Code. But then, talking about our topic, we have what we call, well, I can show you very quick the pipeline, just in case. This one is the canvas for the pipeline. Here you have two options, or you use the copy assistant, or you add the copy directly into the canvas, which is this one. You can choose the source, you can choose the target. Let's say that you are moving data from a file or from a database and you want to move this to a Fabric database. You can choose Azure SQL database here. And then you can use here, for example, the server and the database that I showed you before. And then you can choose the table that you want to move. And then you can just choose the target. That can be a lakehouse, warehouse, another database, whatever you want to do. Then you execute the pipeline and boom, that's it. If you are using on-premises, you can use what is called the gateway. You can configure it on the source. Obviously, you will have, I mean, there will be some requirements that you need to have in order to connect from on-premises into Microsoft Fabric, but you can use the pipeline just to what is called on-premises gateway. But you can use, for example, a Fabric database as a target. Sometimes I receive the question like, hey, why I should use Fabric and not a regular Azure SQL database? What is the use case, or why I am using SQL database? Well, today, for example, I have some customers using SQL database for the metadata. For example, file names, file folders, rows being updated, inserted, deleted, etc. The normal metadata, I am using that. Or for small databases that I am using, for example, a small number of tables, and I want just to import those tables into a Lakehouse or a Power BI, and that's it. Another use case, for example, is that sometimes I am processing files. I am inserting those small files into SQL database, and then I importing directly into Power BI, and then I shut down the capacity from Fabric in order to save costs. That is another use case that I am using today. But then let's go to our notebooks. As I mentioned, we have here my workspace, in where I have all of the services that are created here. There is one new that I don't know if I still have the service, but there was a change here. What is used to be called AI skill now is a data agent. That changes like this week. So now you have a data agent and not only AI skill, which is one of the improvements that have been made here in Fabric. For notebooks, you can click, new item, and then you can search for notebook, and you can create it. You can just put a name, and boom, that's it. So here we have a regular notebook. For example, you can use, as Gaston mentioned, the data factory part, just to schedule, for example, that this process had some dependencies and you're using different, let's say, copy statements, or you are transforming data with a data flow, and you want, to create an entire flow or an entire end-to-end flow. Well, you can use data factory for that. Here, you can just add data sources today, lakehouse and warehouses. So then you can directly execute code, but I will open one of mine. So you can see, for example, here, well, first I have here my original SQL database. And here I have another SQL database, which is outside Fabric. So you can see the difference. The good thing, though, is that you can combine your existing Azure SQL database and the warehouses, and the SQL database. You can just do joins. For example, I am thinking about if you are building, for example, a lakehouse architecture, which is common just to here today, and you have different layers. The regulars are bronze, silver, and gold. Let's say that you are inserting your data into the bronze, you are doing some transformations, removing duplicates, adding columns, adding calculations, etc. And then you go to the gold layer and you create your model there, and you want to combine data that you have in the SQL database and the warehouse. Well, you can do that. It's very simple, just to be honest. In my case, as I mentioned before, I am using a T-SQL notebook. Here, you can choose the language that you want to have for the entire notebook, as you can see here. If you change anything here, this will change everything. So data factories by pacing, Databricks. No, I mean, the thing is that basically they are different technologies. I mean, today you can use Databricks, you can save data into storage accounts, let's say, or different storage accounts if you're using different layers. And then you can, for example, create what is called, you can connect directly into the storage account that is used by Databricks. I mean, the feature is called shortcut. I will show you this in a few. But the thing, it depends where you are. So if you're using Databricks, you can connect Fabric, as I mentioned, using the shortcut. Or if you're using Data Factory, it's the same, Azure Data Factory. So we have two things. One is the service Azure Data Factory, and the other one is the experience within Fabric, which is Data Factory. So they are different things. So thank you for the question. So having said that, here you have, well, basically in order to add data, you just click the button and you will see here. So in Fabric, we have two things. One is the SQL Analytics endpoints, and the other one is the warehouse itself. So basically behind bars is happening a replication between the warehouse and the SQL Analytic endpoint. I don't know if you're familiar or if you use before signups that you were able to use the SQL endpoint in order to connect directly into signups. Well, here is the same. Or as Prashant mentioned, Databricks, well, you can use, for example, in Databricks, the Databricks endpoint in order just to run T-SQL directly into Databricks. Well, here is the same. In my case, I have, well, if you want to connect to a Fabric database, you can connect directly or you can use the SQL endpoint. And then I just put the warehouse here so you can see that you can have multiple warehouse on the SQL database and combine them and just to run some queries, join, etc., etc. Obviously, I have access. That is why I am seeing everything. So you can control this by adding permissions at the workspace level. Let's say that you have multiple warehouse there. Well, you can manage the security there. And so here I have, well, this one is one of my tables which talks about cases. I mean, I can execute this and that's it. And then, for example, I am filtering by a particular case. Then I am updating, as you can see. I mean, using notebooks, I am doing the exact same things that I am doing in Management Studio. Obviously, for example, if you have a big store procedure that you want to split in different parts, you can do that, absolutely. Well, updating, and then, for example, I am using here the SQL database within Fabric, but it's simple. I am just using T-SQL, and that's it. It's very simple, nothing crazy. I am just doing T-SQL. I am a DBA. I love SQL Server, but also I am doing some stuff in Notebook with T-SQL. So having said that, we just talk about T-SQL notebooks. We have other options. Today is not fully supported, if I am honest with you. I created, this will take some time. I created what is called a notebook, but in Python. As you can see here, you have different options, as I mentioned before. Here, I create my own environment. This one was what I mentioned before. I will show you very quick the environment and what can I do within the environment. For example, here you can see that depending on the language, these are the libraries imported by default. So if you want to just execute a command within any of this library, you will be able to. Otherwise, for example, if you want to install or to add more libraries, you can just add them here. For example, I included these two just for testing or just to show you how you can do that. It's very simple. Here you can add from PyPy, and here you can put the library name. Once you put the library name and Fabric recognizes that, you can just click publish just to have the environment with all of the libraries. Or then you can obviously upload some files to install libraries. This one is just to make sure that you are using the libraries that you want to. So you are between, quotes, you are controlling the environment. And if you want to have something standardized, even though it's open source, you are just controlling somehow using the environment. So I have my environment. This one is starting, but anyway, no worries. For example, this one is a normal command that I use to connect to an Azure SQL database. The thing here, for example, when you add what I mentioned before, the SQL endpoint for the SQL database, you will see here that, as you can see, it's not fully supported. So if you try to connect you will get like a timeout because somehow the authentication is not working directly. You can't use SQL authentication as I use here in order to get the data, but you can do something. I mentioned something about, or a feature called shortcut that you can enable in order to bypass that authentication problem. What you can do basically is go to your lakehouse and then just create the shortcut, and then you will be able to connect. So for example, here I am, if I go back, you will see lakehouses, and here you will see some tables. Something that you can see here is that you have something next to the name. It's like an icon. Well, if you see that, it's because it's a shortcut. So if you, for example, attach or insert files, you will not see anything. If you create a shortcut, you will see an icon next to the folder that it will show you that it's a shortcut. But let me see. Let's connect to the here to the lakehouse. And here, this one is my lakehouse. So basically what I did, sorry, was to create what is called a shortcut in order to connect to the SQL endpoint, the one that I had before, which is this one lake, as Gaston mentioned before. Everything is built on what is called one lake. And here you will see the different options, and you will see, for example, here that I have the SQL database. I already imported everything, so I am not going to do this again. And then you will see, for example, the schema, which is sales, LT, and you have here the different tables. You can obviously, from the notebook itself, let me see. Yes, the session is up. Come on.
Hey guys,
yeah,
10 minutes.
Sure. So basically here, for example, I have all of the tables that I mentioned before. You can, for example, go to the schema, then right click, and then click load data and the Spark, and automatically a new cell will appear with the query so you can get the data using the shortcut as I mentioned. Then you click here and you will execute the notebook. And this will run. Obviously, make sure that the session is already running. Otherwise, you will have to wait to the computer start, and that's it. And you will see the data. What else you can do? Well, here we have Copilot that you can ask some questions about your data just to create new interfaces, among other things. And then you will see the information. In my case, I just added a filter here where address ID equals 9. I can change some stuff if I want, and you will see that the information change. Like, I don't know, adding a different address as I did before, or you can, modify the data as you need, and that's it. Otherwise, if, for example, let's say that you are working with business analysts and they are not technical, you can use this one, which is called Data Wrangler, that it will be like a GUI. It's a low-code tool that will help you to create code in order just to modify data. Let's say that you want to, well, basically we created a data frame with the query that we executed through the shortcut. And then you have, for example, different options to clean up the data or just to do some data quality between quotes. And let's say that you want to remove duplicates. Let's say that you want to remove the nulls. Let's say that you want to add columns, remove columns, just to create the data that you need. If you click here, well, we can choose, I don't know, I would say product ID, a single, and then you will see that the code is here. So basically you can add this code to your notebook, and you can continue adding some different steps here in order to clean up your data. Again, do some processing, add more columns, remove nulls, add some calculated columns, let's say, some things that you need from a business perspective, well, you can create everything here, and then you can add the code. You can apply the change, you can add the code, etc., etc. I mentioned Copilot, then you can open directly this in Visual Studio Code. If you prefer to use Visual Studio, you can use that. Then, for example, you have some templates here that you can use. So here you have, depending on the code that you're using, you have some things that maybe they can help you, not only GitHub Copilot, not only Copilot, but also you have some stuff here that if, for example, you're reading data, or if you're using Python and you need different things, you can have the code here, you can copy, you can paste, you can modify, or you can use, if you are using today an F64 capacity from Fabric, you can use Copilot, well, basically, or you use Copilot, or you use this code snippet, or depending what you want to use. And then that's it. We'll have almost 5 minutes for any other question, but mainly I wanted to show you demos as much as I can because I love demos. And let me see if I forget anything from here. I show you notebooks. I show you T-SQL notebooks if you want to use T-SQL code. Yes, Tony, you can use, you can use your personal account, like at outlook.com. You need to use any professional account, but the trial is for 60 days. It's like an F64 capacity, but yes, you can use Fabric for free for 2 months. Just be careful if you are using your company's account, and just make sure that on your tenant, you have available, free accounts, because there is a limit per tenant, and sometimes there are a lot of free accounts and you will receive an error. But otherwise, if you have enabled or if you have available space, you can use this for free. How do I get a developer login? No, you just need to connect to fabric.microsoft.com. It will prompt like, hey, connect. You will use your professional account. It will say, hey, I will create a free account. Next. That's it. Very simple. Well, create a notebook. I already showed you this live, of course. I love suffering with this because all the time something happens, something breaks. Okay. Yes, in government, no. For government, no. So review. We discussed with Gaston about data flows, creating notebooks, creating Power BI dashboards. We show you the entire Fabric stack in terms of integration, obviously how to create SQL databases. That's questions. Again, I will be with Gaston next week on the MGM for the Fabric conference. It will be a great event. You can find me. We will be on the community zone part. The community zone basically is a part where all of the MVPs are there answering questions. There will be different parts. Yeah, it's coming. Yeah. But you can use, I don't know if you have any other domain rather than the government one, but you can see. And again, yes, that's it. Well, the final questions. Otherwise, we can close up. So again, thank you, Tayo, Paresh, and team, and Julie for having me. It was amazing. I hope we can see in FabCon if you are there. Otherwise, you have my contact. In case that you need anything, just feel free to send me an email or a ping in LinkedIn, and I will be happy to help you.
Thank you, guys.
Great session.
Really great. I'll stop the recording now.